All right. Hello, Facebook and YouTube and wherever else we may find ourselves, maybe on Instagram. We are doing a special Wednesday edition. Unfortunately, there was some conflict for tomorrow, so we're going to do it today just because we wanted to still help you all out and stay connected to you. We're still getting lots of questions, so we still want to do this for you. Just tomorrow ended up not working out. So we are here today, which if you're watching the replay, I apologize for the late notice, but this is just how it's working out this week. So I'm getting a lot of parents, and it's not inherently the parents that maybe saw some struggles earlier on, before first grade. It's I started seeing troubles in first grade, right? Second grade was a little bit tougher. Now we're about to enter into third grade, and now I'm a little more worried because I'm seeing, lots of attention, lots of emotional dysregulation. And so why, I get this a lot, but Heather, why don't we always see that right away? What is it about sometimes where we can go through a grade or two, and then when we're getting into that third grade, there's just more difficulty? What's going on there?
There are so many big shifts in what the expectations are, which parts of the brain are being called upon. And so many of our kids who have difficulty with emotional regulation, attention, the regulation portions of the brain are also often the big picture parts of the brain. And when they're in the parts of school where just learn your math facts, learn what sounds go with what letters, easy peasy, man, I could do that in my sleep. But you add on the frustration of, now I'm supposed to start connecting the dots and put all these building blocks of learning together and start inferring and using abstract thought and not just these concrete facts that I can memorize in my sleep. Now I'm frustrated and don't know how to deal with it. And what was already underlying starts showing up.
Right. Yeah. So in the beginning, it's a little bit more, it's more narrow, right? We're not looking at the full big picture. We're just kind of memorizing some stuff. And so there are certainly kids with that skill set, like they can remember everything, right? And that works well. But then when we have to go a little bit more abstract, when we need to go bigger picture, and around the third grade is usually that's where that big leap is coming in academically wise from a pressure aspect. That's when we're starting to see that, right? Like we don't have that. We struggle there. That's what it is. We struggle, right? It's not that we inherently can't do it, but we're struggling. And so it's definitely popping up.
One other thing that goes in with that, like when people think of attention, the first thing that usually pops into people's minds is sustained attention. Like how long can my child attend to a topic or to a task? There are so many different types of attention. And one of those is actually called focused attention, which sounds redundant when you think about it, but that has a lot to do with I can attend to auditory stimuli. I can attend to visual stimuli. When you're little, so much of the work is often hands-on with manipulatives, and maybe they have difficulty attending to a specific mode of sensory input. We have some kids who have excellent attention hands-on, or excellent attention auditorily or visually, but one of those other pieces is not in place. So that's another thing that comes in there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And alternating attention. For some kids, maybe beyond third grade, it's switching classes and having to switch gears. Alternating attention requires a ton of cognitive flexibility. We were on this task. I was with this teacher. I was getting in this zone. And now I have to completely switch gears and go to another topic altogether, another class, and that can also be an issue.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the demand is higher, the complexity is higher. We all know that, right? But then also, I have some kids that just, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they can slip under the radar. Like they may have. As Heather mentioned, like auditory processing issues, or maybe even visual processing, or some sort of sensory processing issue, but they can compensate, or they make it right under the radar, and then bam, once we hit this demand right around the third grade, you're like, where did this kid? And I always feel bad for these parents too, because they're like, I did not see this coming, right? Like they were just incredible. They were doing so good. And then now I don't know what happened. But really, the complexity, the demand, the ability to flip back and forth wasn't there, or the demand wasn't high enough to show what was going on truly. And so I truly feel bad for them. But what are some things that parents can start looking for right now if their child is maybe first or even going into third? What are some things that we can maybe cue in on to help them say, hey, right, this may be an issue. I want to start investigating this.
Yeah, one of the things back to, we always talk about logging things. It's so powerful because really start looking at, is there a difference in how they can attend with a hands-on task versus something, directions that you're giving them verbally versus things they're supposed to look at and follow along with. That's super helpful. Start noticing, okay, they were on task and there was a loud sound, something shifted in the oven that was cooking, and they looked, which that part's normal. Most people are going to say, what was that noise? Is it hard to get them redirected back? That is cognitive flexibility and alternating attention. That would equate to somebody drops a book or there's a loud sound in the hallway at school, and then it takes them 5 minutes to switch gears back to paying attention to the teacher. So start thinking about that, which modes. It is usually not choice, and I know it looks like if they're interested in something, they could attend all day long, and if they're not, that doesn't happen. But there might be other aspects to the task making that the case. And when they're doing things that they're good at, that they're interested in, they can often do those things like this. I can walk all day long. If to attend to this harder task, I'm having to churn through it, that is not going to be sustained as long. What are the things in their wheelhouse, and what are the things that, even if don't go by grades, which things do they have to sweat it out to do? And that's another thing to consider as well.
Yeah, and just I love the logging idea because it really does help show patterns of behavior and patterns that we don't see, right? Sometimes there can be very subtle patterns where you're like, I did not realize this was happening. And I think maybe one of the things that's probably most common that I see is auditory processing issues, where parents are asking or teachers are asking them to verbally to fulfill something, some sort of task, and the child gets lost, and sometimes it's misinterpreted as being defiant or poor attention or lazy. Generally, when they get older, sometimes we'll have that term lazy, but their brains are just not taking in that information correctly. And so sometimes parents, when they start logging this, are like, I notice every time that I give a little list of commands, I'm seeing this behavior. And so I love that idea because it really is very, very helpful.
Yeah. And auditory, there's a thing of, can they attend to auditory stimuli? Can they attend to visual? And then there is a thing of, it is not attention at all. And it is getting discombobulated, like Brian is saying, and it's actually a sensory processing issue. And then that may not even be attention, even though some of the symptoms play out the same. And so those often get confused. It is very common for students who have, for example, eye tracking issues when they're reading, to finish reading and think, I have no clue what I just read. And it looks like comprehension. It looks like memory. It looks like, they just blanked out attention. I used to think I was a space cadet when I couldn't remember what I had just read. And it was visual perception. It had zero to do with attention. It's that my entire cognitive load was taken up with, I just lost track. Where was I? It was skipping over letters and words. Your load is full. I don't have any space left to attend. I don't have any space left to pay attention to what I was reading. So just we can't go by symptoms. Do write down the symptoms. Do write down all of the extraneous factors. This is another thing why little ones, it gets missed. If they have not been around a sensory intense environment with lots of change, lots of sounds, lots of sights, lots of fray going on, and then they suddenly go to preschool, kindergarten, and they're surrounded by that, there is a difference between sensory processing disorder, just SPD in general, and attention. You can have both. You don't want to assume one thing's not there because the other is, but is something getting thought of as one thing when really it's something else?
Yeah, I think that's going to probably be, there's going to be some surprise here coming out of the pandemic as things change. And as we go back to school, maybe if they didn't go to school the first year, but back to your point of just patterns, because patterns tell us stuff, right? It can look like one thing. Symptoms do matter in the aspect of it kind of gives you a lead, right? Like it kind of gives you a broader aspect of what may be happening. But when you can start seeing patterns, it really helps you decipher. And I don't know about you, Heather, but I've had kids come in and they're given a diagnosis, but you look at the pattern, you look at the neurology, and you're like, that's not what I'm seeing. And it's not, it's when you do that deep investigation, like I know you all do, and kind of weeding out the symptoms and looking at the neurology, that's when you really figure out what's going on with these kids. And that's why I love what we do, right? Is we're not, oh, that's a symptom, right? They're just inattentive, right? We'll just, yeah, that's what it is. We're actually digging. We're trying to find and help these kiddos. So that's why I love what we do. But the journaling is the best, in my opinion, from a parent aspect.
Yeah, distractibility. We test a lot of kids and we test their attention and it is on point, but they get distracted, and that distractibility leads to inattention. But why are they getting distracted? Are they oversensitive to stimuli coming in? A lot of even what looks like fidgety, it is fidgety, but then you can just think, okay, they're having trouble attending and they're fidgety. So then certain conclusions can get jumped to. But a lot of times when people are, doing this with their fingers or tap, 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 chew, 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 chew on something, they might be seeking proprioceptive input. They may have body awareness issues. A lot of times when kids get up and move around the room, they need movement information because of decreased equilibrium, or every time they take a step on the floor or tap their foot on the floor, they are feeling their body better than they otherwise would. And it may not be a quote unquote hyperactivity issue, even though there's fidgetiness involved. A lot of those little tics or types of repetitive movements just simply mean I am overwhelmed. And so my body checks out and then the brain follows. But we take care of those things and a lot of that improves. We know equilibrium, 68% of quote unquote underperforming students in school. I would argue that maybe they're not underperforming because there are hidden churns going on. But those believed to be underperforming have confirmed equilibrium issues, and that doesn't even count the ones who haven't been tested. And what does that lead to? Anxiety, decreased concentration, decreased ability to follow instructions or conversations, particularly with background noise, decreased visual perception, and other things.
Yes, I mean, equilibrium plays into everything, right? I mean, it's such an important aspect in our neurology. And I would say, probably out of kids that walk out of my office, I would say 999 out of 1,000 have some sort of equilibrium concern or issue or problem, right? Varying degrees, right? It's there. It's very, very prevalent. And we know that impacts the eyes, and it's all this working together. And so, I mean, that was spot on, right? I mean, that's one of the first things I'm looking at, right? Is that. And I just love what you were talking about before too, just like with the eyes. And I get these really like intelligent kids that come in, and they're just, like blowing my mind with how smart they are, just really awesome kids. And you test their eyes, and those poor kids can barely track a pen light. I mean, and then we're asking them to read, and you're just like, but they're giving all these diagnoses, right? ADHD or whatever else. But the poor kiddos, their sensory system is just overwhelmed. They're just looking for sensory stimulation, and they're just, out of balance, sort of say. And so I love what you're talking about there. It's huge. The whole system plays together, and when they don't play well together, that's when we start seeing symptoms. But we have to find the system systems that aren't working, because when we start chasing symptoms, it's just a dog chasing its tail. So
yeah. Another thing to think about is slow cognitive tempo. That is not an official diagnosis in the DSM-5. I think there's a decent shot that it's going to be in the next iteration of the diagnostic manual. But it looks very similar to ADHD inattentive type, because a lot of times you do not have the same emotional dysregulation. We've had a lot of kids coming in lately where there are attentional concerns, but not the emotional dysregulation. We have emotional dysregulation is a huge thing we work with, but we've had a slew of kids coming in. Think about if you give them plenty of time to process what you're saying, do they get there? It can look like they're daydreaming. It can look like they're sleepy, lethargic. They're often called lazy or unmotivated, but it might be that they just have a slower processing speed. And that is something else to consider. It is a very real phenomenon. Some of the leading researchers in the field are saying, consider slow cognitive tempo. That may not, you can have more than one thing going on, but is it just a matter of, if we go at their tempo, they get there? But that daydreaming look is the slow processing time where they are really just kind of thinking through it. But they may be under energetic. I mean, probably some of the people watching is like, I'll take a dose of that for a minute. But it's a problem because school goes at a certain pace, you know.
Right.
So there are just so many things to think about. Do they know why what they're doing matters? We talk all the time about really getting engagement going and purpose behind what they're doing. By the way, decreased body awareness makes it very hard for me to grow a sense of self and to have intrinsic motivation. And so I would start, if you're having kids who are having trouble staying on task or getting started, start with the why they're doing what they're doing, not what it is they're doing. That alone can, how can we reframe things? Oh, this is so boring. I go to write a paper. I get to do some investigating. How even words matter. I mean, just the way you frame it, or, you know, I'm stuck. I'm not going to turn this paper in because I don't think it's quite right yet. And so what's wrong with me? Because now I'm stuck. How about reframing that into, I care about this because I want this to be just right. Whether it is self-talk, whether it is the way that an assignment is being framed. With little ones, you can talk about, pretend like you're writing this to like their favorite superhero, or to, you know, to some character that they care about. You can just reframe things in such a way that it makes such a difference. And respect attentional capacity. I mean, breaks are not a distraction. The only way you know what a distraction is if you know what it's distracting you from. I mean, traction moves us closer to our goals. Nir Eyal is huge on saying the opposite of distraction is not attention, it is traction, because traction is moving you closer to your goals. Taking a break is still moving someone closer to their goals, because you are kind of emptying out that capacity where now I have more to give it. You know, doing movement breaks and things like that. If you don't know what if watching a movie as a family, that's not a distraction if you had it in your calendar and this is family time. So it's about really having intentionality to what is it that was planned for that time, and the downtime is just as important and just as, you know, reinvigorating for the brain, because we do have a capacity.
100%. And there are a couple people watching, so please comment. But one of the things that I love that just to tie this back to journaling, right, is let's just say, for instance, we have a kiddo who's not wanting to do a project, right? Sometimes it's the intrinsic why, like they don't understand why. And that's very important for the kids we work with. Why, like, we're explaining why we're doing this, but also there could be a prediction issue. I don't know literally how to do this. I don't know what the outcome needs to look like. And therefore I withdraw or say this is boring or I don't want to do it. And so back again to the journaling, like sometimes you can tease that information out by rephrasing it and seeing if it changes. Like they have an intrinsic why, kids will do it all the time, 100% of the time. It's amazing what they're willing to do if they understand the why. But then also, I've had the opposite where there's just literally the inability to understand what is happening next. And they immediately say, I don't want to do this. This is boring. They'll use the term boring, or I don't like this. And they just don't know what to expect. And we're all like that, right? You know, whenever you go into a scenario where you don't know what's next, that fight or flight system kicks in and we withdraw, we fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so that's just their variation of it. They just use the term boring.
That's right. And another thing that's really common, and this can plague all of us at one point or another, and even more so when there are neurodevelopmental issues going on, but it's called bike shedding. And it is the brain's amazing ability to convince us that this minute detail that we are focusing on has to be, we got to get this part just right. And it is actually an avoidance tactic so that we don't have to get to the harder part of what it is we're doing. Think of it as an adult. If you have this big task to do and one portion of that involves a phone call you need to make, and man, I don't get along with this person, this usually doesn't go well, and you're dreading it, you might just have like perfectionistic tendencies going on this one portion of it, and it's actually an avoidance, and there's no way that piece of the project needed to take an entire day. It could have been done in 10 minutes. You might have gotten 2% more of a quality project by spending all day on it versus 10 minutes. That is bike shedding, but with our kids, I mean, that's a game we can play with ourselves without realizing we're doing it. But with our kids, it really might be that they cannot distinguish what is most relevant and irrelevant to solve this. So much of paralysis and lack of task initiation comes from what Brian said. Yes, fight or flight system, avoidance, part of that flight or freeze part of the fight or flight. But also, when I think about, okay, what are the main portions of getting this project done? Think of them as the Roman numerals. And then what are the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s that help me get Roman numeral 1 number done? What are the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s that help me get Roman numeral number 2 completed? When kids write that down because they lack big picture and knowing how the details fit into that, everything is the Roman numeral. Everything is the big deal. That is overwhelming. And then you have, I escape to video games. I'll do it later. They have all the excuses, or they do bike shedding and hone in with their colorful, glittery pins on it, one part of it, and not get to the part that they're really dreading, that they don't feel confidence in.
Would you call that analysis paralysis? Because adult friends of mine are like, I have analysis paralysis, and they're honing in on one point, and they're over analyzing one point. But if you look back at it, what are they doing? They're avoiding finishing the parts they don't know how to finish.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
Yeah. And so a lot of this has to do with experimenting with your kids, because there are so many individual differences on sometimes, like if this is all the homework that needs to be done sometimes, and of course, giving them choice and some say in this. But sometimes it's good to tackle something that they're strongest at, just so that you get your mojo going. Other times, while they're fresh, and you kind of think about their rhythms, because we all have certain parts of the day where we're most productive. We need to tackle something hard when they're freshest. But here's a little trick. If you tell yourself, I only need to do this for 10 minutes. When I do it for 10 minutes, I will go do this distracting thing, whatever it is that I wanted to do instead of this. But 10 minutes feels doable. It's no longer overwhelming. And once you got your mojo going, you may find that you stick with it after the 10 minutes. That happens a lot. It's just a matter of getting the ball moving.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're right at the 23-minute mark. There are a few people watching, so please ask a question. I think that was a really good coverage. We gave a lot of little tips there. So, but if you're watching this, you can always watch the replay. If you have a specific question, you're watching the replay, and I wish Brian or Heather would have talked a little bit more about this, or I want to understand this better. Please comment. Please message us. And Heather, somebody wants to find you. You're all over the place, but where do they follow you?
At The Hidden Churn on Instagram or Facebook, and also at Brain Balance of the Woodlands, Mansfield, Katy, or Southlake.
All right. And she's awesome. So she does a second podcast. All right. And she does them on Mondays at 2:00. Do you have one coming up this Monday?
We do. And this past Monday didn't happen just for kind of little emergency reasons. So planning on doing the topic I mentioned last week about, now I'm just going blank. What is it?
Okay.
Oh, the difference between is selective listening. Often what looks like selective listening is not. It's a sign of neurodevelopmental challenge, and how to know the difference and what to do.
Ooh, that is a really good one. Definitely pay attention to that. Please share that to the Dallas Holistic group for us. I would love for them to hear that as well. But that would be a fantastic. There we go. I can speak. Fantastic podcast. Go listen to that. Make sure you follow on all our pages. You can get a hold of me. You can follow me at Dallas Energy Chiropractic, both on Facebook and Instagram. Or if you need to speak with me directly, you can call 972-387-4700. All right, we are finishing up. So the next few weeks are still going to be school related, getting our kids ready, routine things. There's a lot that can go into this prep. I know I have lots of parents that are kind of dreading it, stressing about it. We were coming out of a pandemic, which is very unusual. Some parents don't know how the kids are going to, handle first grade. Some parents, they're like, they were in school first grade, then second was, pandemic, and now we're going. So I'm getting lots of questions over this. We want to make sure we answer them for you. So if you have specific questions about school, getting your kids ready for school, what to expect, all that stuff. Obviously, some of those are very specific, but if we can ask or answer very broad questions about that stuff, we would love to do that for you. All right. And as far as I know, next Thursday, we're going to be back on it, right? If anything changes, I will alert you and let you know. We have a little bit of a fluid schedule for the next few weeks too, possibly. So it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, most likely. If anything changes, I will put it up so you all see it ahead of time. But thank you for being flexible with us. I love it and appreciate that. Heather, as always, thank you for everything you do for all the families in your community. And make sure you go follow her on her pages. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.